Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L. Now let's talk some Death March, episode 5. Cool. We're all here. Good. Let's do this. So Death March, episode 5. Yeah. We took a break from the larger plot, pretty much, and we just kind of focused on the girls, specifically the newer girl, Arisa. Lulu also came in this, but she didn't really get that much focus in the episode. But that said, this episode was more of establishing elements for future plotline episode. So because of that, depending on what kind of viewer you are, you might not be super into it. But if you're into like the slice of life aspects, then this is probably gonna be one of the stronger episodes, because I do think some of the things that Arisa was introducing were, I know they're very important. So it's just one of those things. Let's just get into it. And the first thing I'll start off with saying is, haha, Sato said Sato is the correct pronunciation, and then everyone else who's saying Satu is wrong. Haha, ha 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 ha. I'm so happy to have gotten that. Anyway, I have notes, so we're gonna go through the notes, and then we'll just talk about other little bits of the episode that I might have forgotten to write about. So the first thing that I want to clarify is about the adaptation, because last video I pointed out the things about the house that was stuck inside the labyrinth. Someone else in the comments pointed out more, specifically that we lost out on a visit to nobility, and we also lost out on some information regarding the scroll that Sato picked up. Now the nobility visit, I think we could ignore that one if we consider like when exactly that particular plotline gets paid off. That might like hint to a sadder reality that we, or maybe the studio doesn't plan to ever get that far where that plot point is going to be useful enough. Because if I recall, that plot point of visiting that noble's house really only pays off when Sato starts engaging with nobles more. Another thing, the scroll. The scroll is a bigger issue because it would have highlighted a specific problem that Sato has, and it also would have highlighted a specific endeavor that Sato will undertake, because that scroll really started it off. So this was an issue of those elements, I think, have more prominence towards the end, and unfortunately because of that, they might have been things that they got sacrificed. Because like, I'm thinking about this, and we're already like at the end of the episode, we're looking at the new girl that's popping up with the rat, and I'm thinking, that feels pretty far along. I wonder if they're gonna stretch that arc into the last, I think, let's assume this is a 12 episode series. I actually don't know if the count got updated yet, but even then, like 7 episodes to devote to the girl that we see at the end seems a bit aggressive. We'll have to see how they pace the rest of it. Man, I'm still hoping for that somehow we get to Baron Muno, but that might not happen. Anyway, so that was the note there. So let's go in with the rest of the episode. Arisa. So Arisa is presenting a mystery for us at the beginning of this episode, right? We have this girl and she knows Japanese. She knows what Sato's saying. She knows Sato's correct pronunciation. She's presenting a mystery. So for the viewer, it's like, okay, that's interesting, right? Like, why does this girl know Japanese? Well, what's going on? So there's that, and that's going to be the prevalent thread that we're going to be following throughout, I guess, the episode. Although the mystery very quickly, like once Sato starts talking to her, the mystery goes away very quickly. Other things that are going on though before we get there is that we're having a lot of dynamics established, and we're getting a better picture of how shitty things are in this world. For instance, we have Lulu's self-description, and to some degree it's the saddest thing ever. I mean, the poor girl's describing herself as, right, I'm just looking for the words here, sturdy as a horse or a heifer. So don't cast her aside. That's really bad. When the poor girl has to be describing herself akin to farm animals and their reliableness, that's she's trying to like pump up her value so this person doesn't like just kill her, right? Because at that point, slaves are just in a really bad situation. So that's terrible. We find out also about the food situation, which was like, well, they just don't eat. They eat things they find in the park, like acorns and weeds. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. This is terrible. That's all I can say about the situation. It's a terrible situation. That said, because they're pretty girls, people will usually overlook, oh, you know, they're going through really bad circumstances, but it's like, nah, man, like it's really bad. So it was cool to get that little world element, but it's one of those world elements that we're really not going to feel unless we see it happening to other people. Let's see, other note I had here is that dynamics are being established at the 423 mark. Right, so when you look at this, and you specifically look at what's going on with Liza in particular, because Liza's establishing her dynamic very quickly. If you look the way she's talking, she's very, I don't want to say prudish, like dutiful, kinda, like she's speaking very proper, she's showing a lot of respect to Sato. So like her characterization is going strong, and then we also see that she's taking care of the two smaller ones, which she has been doing since they were all in the same slave group before this, but it's becoming more pronounced because now it's Liza's following behind them while carrying the two little girls. Like she's effectively a babysitter, and she's the one that's telling them to like, hey, don't be so stupid. Like let's all behave here. Let's all behave here. So Liza's accepting more of that protector kind of role because with Sato, she's like, she feels like if she's worth enough to be this honorable, this protective, this orderly, this mannerful, is that a word? Like she's just trying to be very courteous. So it's interesting. It's like she's taking the air of professional versus friend, whereas the little girls are still very much just being little girls. And of course we have a lot of nice little moments with the little girls, with Sato just like taking care of them, just being kind of like a parent, just minding them, just telling them like, hey, little, don't do this, don't do that, or hey, you know, let me help you out there. It's really adorable, but it's cool to see the dynamics being established. I know Arisa's also kind of establishing a dynamic because she's getting along with the little girls as well. That makes sense given what we know about Arisa later on in the episode, that she doesn't have a bias against the kin. So moving on, I have a note here about Arisa saying moe. Alright, so that's obviously very important. She makes a comment that that's so moe at something that Sato does, I think, revolving around the little girls. That is a small indication of what Arisa's personality is. So keep that in mind, because that has more to do with her history as a Japanese person than it does with anything that happened to her in this world. Okay, moving on. Next one I have is the Sato food critic, because again we get the food criticizing scene. Sato is eating some food and talking about how good it tastes. This is Death March. It's just, I'm really surprised that they are just so hardcore, pretty much holding on to this aspect of Death March. And so if they're just gonna do this, like they're gonna give us like one little blurb about food every episode, cool. That's cool, man. I'm totally into it. The food is the biggest struggle that this boy will ever face, so yeah, it's fine. Now let's see. Next note here is that I was surprised that we kept the random orphans. That was there to establish we have a situation. Okay, so we had random orphans halfway through the episode where Sato was going down the street and he gave them food. Obviously, it was expanded more in the original novels, but the issue here was I'm surprised that we kept them in because they were kind of inconsequential. But the idea here is to just establish that the subhuman races are in a really bad situation in this particular world, and as we see, there's just bands of slaves just hanging around the streets, and they can't really do much because they're second-class people, I guess. So having them there is to just establish, like, you know, even though Sato is helping out these 5 slaves, he can't really help everyone. And so the bigger connotation to that scene would have been like that Sato just can't take in all the slaves, even though that would be the nicest situation to have. But it does, or it would inform his decisions later on in the story. So this is a story element that right now you could say is being kept, because right now we're going about the whole slave things and their treatment. We're highlighting that in this episode, so therefore you could keep that element in there. But that element in particular has a bigger payoff again later on in the novel. A lot of the elements being presented have bigger payoffs later on in the novels, which is unfortunate for viewers, because it's like, you know, you wish you could see all the payoffs for this show now, but it's just kind of the thing that happens with light novel adaptations and long-running shonen. More prevalent with light novel adaptations though, because those tend to be a bit more planned out. It's just one of those things where we really have no choice but to just kind of go with it. But at least, you know, it's an element that makes sense in the context of we need to establish that this place is shitty for beast folk. Okay, now we're going into the Arisa stronger bit of the episode because I have a 10-minute 15 mark, and that is the super poker face use. So the skill interface, I think, came in so handy this one because it's funny to see the girls stripped down, and then it's even more funny to see the spot with Sato, and then his face is just stone cold, and then you have the little icon box popping up, poker face. And it's just like, okay, that was really clever. That was really good. That was really slick. That was so slick. I really appreciated it. It's a very simple thing, but I so appreciated it. And this is, again, talking about the treatment of slaves. Because the slaves here, of course, people would use them for these kind of services. Of course, there would be slave owners that are like this. That wasn't surprising. I think the only thing that protected the other 3 girls is that they're pretty much subhuman species. So no one would want to touch them. But it's just kind of funny. Not the slave part, only the part that Sato's box popped up. I thought that was really funny. Anyway, we get the Arisa tries to sneak into Sato's bed moment, and she's playing hardball because she's using magic to affect him. And you know, if Sato was in level 310, that probably would have worked, but it didn't. But it just shows her what she's going after. Like, she had fallen in love with this boy. This was the man of her dreams. If you notice the qualities that she's talking about, those are qualities that match up with the standard Japanese man. So that kind of informs us of her like certain qualities, but it's just, you know, she's having her moment with Sato, and from there we find out all the other really cool things for this episode. Although I will make the note, it was really funny that Arisa's there like pretty much screaming out loud and Lulu's still sound asleep. Anyway, aside from Arisa's just foolishness and then Sato kind of dealing with it by taking advantage of the slave system in general, which was a pretty smart way of using that at that moment. We have some things being brought up, like how exactly humans from Japan get transferred into this world, and that being the confirmation that there are 2 systems officially known of, but possibly 3 at work, because we find out that there is the reincarnation system, which is what happened to Arisa, and then the transfer system, which seems to have been what happened to Sato, except not really. So this is where like Death March brought in elements from other stories, right? In some isekai stories, there's the reincarnation system. Like the person is reborn from baby all the way to adulthood in the other world. Some other stories have the kids just being ripped out of time and brought over to that world just as he was. The as he was part is very important because, as we see, when Sato came to the world, he got de-aged. So this is what tells us it's a bit different, and also Arisa gives us the context. There was no summoning circle, so Sato most likely was not brought in as a transfer as according to the laws of this world. On Arisa's side, she talked a little bit more about the reincarnation system, specifically that the reincarnate meet God. So Arisa has met God, and she asks Sato whether or not he meets God. So those are all very important things, and with Arisa we are establishing one of the bigger plot lines, that being who exactly or what system brought in Sato, which I think is a pretty good one. So Arisa's given us enough things to think about, and then she also gives us the story about her past, which it's really sad, right? Like, she was a princess, things went downhill for that country. She most likely came in on the same plot that most reincarnates come in on in other stories, in that she came in, she applied knowledge from her world, and she tried to make her country better. But unfortunately things went bad, and we find out they were sold into slavery and their parents were killed, and I think the crown prince as well, so her brother. So really unfortunate stuff. And what's really sad is that we're not going to get a follow-up or conclusion to this plot till like really past volume 10. I can't remember which volume exactly, but I know this plot in particular isn't going to have any closure for a very long time. So right now we just have to deal with an Arisa that has survived that situation, instead of an Arisa that will ever kind of come to peace with that situation, which is unfortunate, but it's like it's just one of those things. Other things that we find out, well, I'm just going through the small things. Lulu is considered ugly in this world, which is unfortunate. She has the genetics of a Japanese person, pretty much. That's the race. The problem is the features of the Japanese race as they present themselves in women, and so. Is that right? Is it right to say Japanese race? Okay, you know what? Like, it's just, you know, the features of the standard Japanese person, those features are seen as ugly in that world. That's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna be really careful about that. Anyway, yeah. So, unfortunate stuff for Lulu. Let's see what other little bits I have. All right, so the last little bit, that mix up at the end. So that was funny in general. You have Lulu on one side, thinking horrible things are happening to her. Poor girl probably had it on her mind. And then you have Arisa, who's just very happy with her current spot next to Sato. So obviously that would bother someone. And in this time it was Xena. So, you know, that was an unfortunate little situation. But Sato was so slick afterwards, just jumping out of the window and then just grabbing Xena. And it's like, where did you put that hand, Sato? Like, what are you doing there, buddy? But it was all a very funny little thing, and it's also funny to see how Sato makes use of his skills to try and smooth things over with Xena. You know, that was a very humorous event. I was really into it. I think it was funny. And then we just have the rest of the episode, or the remainder of the episode is just the girls getting along, or the slave girls getting along, which is nice. That's what Death March is going to be revolving around. It's going to be this family unit, sort of. So, cool stuff all around. That was pretty much this episode 5 of Death March. We're 16 minutes in, and yeah, I think overall it was a solid episode when it comes to introducing more world elements. Now, after the ending song rolled, we had another scene featuring the blue-haired girl in the ending. So that's where we're going next, and I'm pretty excited. We're almost there, so let's see what happens. Anyway, guys, yeah, I'm done there. Let me know what you thought, and if anyone wants to point out any other things that were being left out for this episode, go for it. Comments down below. But anyway, guys, till next time, I hope you have a great day.